Hey, look at what's up, Murray? First, man, dude, thank you guys for the opportunity. Like
Yeah.
I've been in Colorado for the last 10 years, or 13 years, really. And, a lot of people have heard, some of my stories, but nobody really knew me. So a lot of it sounded like just untrue. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Sort of unbelievable. Yeah.
To be able to tell, to talk to somebody who was there, you were there, you knew me,
hmm
back in high school, and
Yeah.
we met, like we were talking about the other day, Street Fighter and playing video games at my
I was
mom's
telling
house.
the story.
Yeah, it's been a trip. It's born Stephen Cameron Watson, and in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
My dad's Marine Corps. My mom's the second marriage, and they got divorced when I was young. And my mom remarried to Mike Jenkins, who's also a federal bank examiner, retired. And at first, he traveled a lot, all over the United States, doing the whole bank examiner thing.
Huh.
And my mom was home, with me,
Uh-huh.
and I'm running around the house kicking soccer balls and getting stitches, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I was a handful, but a good kid,
Yeah.
and my mom would sit there in the living room on her bar stool with a cigarette and a glass of wine, just belting out Linda Ronstadt, That's what I would come home to,
Is that the
from playing in
Blue
the yard or
Lagoon
something.
lady?
Yeah. What's up?
Is that the Blue Lagoon lady?
Oh, I don't know.
It's
Or Blue Bayou?
coming back one day.
Yeah.
The- Yeah,
Isn't
blue,
that
yeah,
Blue
Blue Bayou.
Bayou?
Yeah, Blue Bayou. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah. Miles is great at that. She loves some Linda Ronstadt,
All right.
but so it's cool, Then my stepdad got and I stayed in touch with my dad. That was a big thing too. My parents did that right.
Yeah. That's cool.
It was, a couple months during the summer and every other holiday, I was with my dad and
Mhm.
his new wife. And I have a half sister from my dad's first marriage, Monica. She's a Monica Zeltzfay now.
Mhm.
Super cool chick. Yeah, I mean, so for having parents that went through a divorce, everything was all right.
Yeah.
I still got to see my dad, and I still, I didn't ever feel like, I was missing, of course I missed him, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But, I still got to see him. I still got to talk to him whenever I wanted to.
Yeah. Well, I just
Um,
remember when I met you, you were a normal, just a
Right.
high school kid, man.
Yeah. And Mike is awesome. Mike took some getting used to for me because, he's a type A personality. He's very, when I was young, my dad was, like the crazy light off fireworks, Marine Corps guy, like,
Yeah, I
you
wouldn't know
know,
anything about that.
yeah, a little more like open. And plus, when I saw him, there was always something scheduled. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
something
We
to
were
do.
always going to go do something. But Mike took care of my mom. Still takes care of my mom, and always made sure that I had whatever I needed and most of what I wanted. And he managed to get. And he noticed while we were still in Charlotte that I could throw a baseball.
Yeah.
That I could throw a ball. So he landed a job stationary in Washington D.C. and that's when we moved to Loudoun County. And I was in Cardinal Glen. I don't know if you remember Cardinal Glen.
Yeah, I remember Cardinal Glen.
Right
I remember
across
you
from
also
Fairleigh
were
Park.
kind of an athlete, man. You played baseball and you played golf, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're actually going tomorrow. My boss, I work for a really cool company, Life to Design, and John Curtis Design. Where we're going to hit some golf balls tomorrow.
right.
Yeah. So I went to Sterling Elementary, and that's where I met, like Robbie Schlack and Erica Schlack and all those people. And I started Little League, and then they started building, and everything was cool. Just a normal kid doing my thing,
Yeah.
riding bikes and playing in construction sites and stuff like that,
Yep.
And so it's Gen Xers too. Like we played construction sites and threw rocks at each other.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I
That's
mean?
exactly.
And
Take your
everything
bike
was
in there.
okay.
Yeah.
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 Coolest place to
And,
ride, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Cascades was starting to be built.
Yeah. Jeez.
And my mom had started back, I think trying to get some of her certifications to possibly get back into the banking industry. She was pregnant. She worked for State Employees Credit Union. She was a teller pregnant with me in North Carolina. And I think she wanted to get back into that. So I think she had started possibly trying to get some certifications. And we were the first people the second people to buy a house in Cascades and the
Yeah.
first people to move in of all of Cascades. As you
Okay.
know, that's like what, an 1,800 home development.
Yeah.
And so that also meant that I was on the other side of Route 7. So I went to a new school now. I went to Seneca Ridge.
That's where I went.
Yeah. And I think I've probably seen you,
When I
at
was in
that
eighth
point,
grade.
yeah. And, I made the transition, it was elementary school. You know what I mean? I wasn't from here anyways.
Yeah.
It was okay. And I could still see my friends, if I wanted to. But, went to Seneca Ridge, did normal kid stuff, man. Everything was cool. Mom started, when we moved to Cascades, she actually started working for the visitor center. She was the lady that you saw when you walked in, and she handed out the brochures and showed you the maps and all that stuff. And it was what it was, and we had a good time. Like, as watching people move into the development and stuff, I was fortunate that kids moved in.
Oh yeah.
Like Aaron Gross and David Simonetti, Matt Deal, William Wynn, like all those guys, they all pretty much moved in at this, around the same time or back to back.
Yeah.
So, here we are, 7, 8 kids just playing in the mud, because that's all Cascades was, of that red Virginia corn,
big construction site.
Yeah. And so we built skateboard ramps and did all that. And because there's plenty of wood at the construction sites.
Yeah.
We actually built a half pipe in my backyard.
Just the cops have a problem with that sometimes.
Yeah. They really didn't bother us too much, The mailman would get pissed because we always had a giant ramp in front of the mailbox, but he just move it out of the way and then go on,
Yeah.
My parents did fun things, like the community wasn't going to open the pool one year, and it was ready. The pool was ready, and we were all ready. I mean, the kids were dealing with their own stuff. So were the parents living in a new development like that,
Yeah.
So we all jumped the fence. You know what I mean? Like the parents led the charge. You know what I mean? We all jumped the fence, and we're having a pool party, There's 50, 60 adults and the kids were riding our skateboards off the diving boards, what I mean? Not going to open the pool. Yeah, right. You know what I mean?
We'll open it.
But it was cool to see these responsible adults just be like, no, we're opening the pool. And it was cool. And Mike, of course, got in on it and all that, and at that point, I'd started playing Little League, and that was predominantly in Sterling Park, and Mike was my coach, which was awesome. I was a pitcher and a shortstop. Mike actually I sent Mike something on Father's Day, and just to let him know that, I recognize how much he had to deal with and how hard I made it for him. You know what I mean? But that I recognize that and that I appreciated him, and he sent me back something saying that, it wasn't all bad, and there was a picture of my no-hitter baseball, So, it was cool. And then met Carol and Jim DeDonna, live right down the street. That's Melissa's parents. Became good friends with my mom. My mom left the job at the visitor center and started studying, I think, for Series 7, and started working for Merrill Lynch in Tyson's Corner, and by that time, I think I was a freshman in high school at Broad Run.
Mm-hmm.
And I met Melissa Donna. She lived right down the street. She was the pretty girl. I'd always go skateboard in front of her house, hoping she'd come outside. You know what I mean? And super cool chick. Yeah. And, that's just kind of how things went. She made sure that I was okay. If I needed to ride to school, I got to ride to school. She introduced me to a lot of the people, the upperclassmen. She was a junior when I was a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And, her sister was a senior, Candace, at the time. And all it was just building skateboard ramps and all that and doing our thing, and then, sophomore year thing, I think this is my sophomore year. I think I started smoking pot with James Meekins.
Mm-hmm.
And, smoking weed out of a Coke can, just doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, this is probably, I wanted to keep it to milestones and stuff. I think that the game changer in my life, because dude, I was going to play baseball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I was going to do. I was going to I was terrified of the coaches at Broad Run. Coach Lamb, Coach Todd, we were just absolutely terrifying. But now that I look back on it, they were the type of people that I needed to be around. And I was going to come around I made the baseball team.
Yeah. I remember.
Easily. and they were grooming me to pitch. And in the beginning of my junior year, that's when things started changing. That's when Loudoun County pulled their huge stunt. They enrolled a cop into our high school.
I
You know,
wasn't
as a
there by
stu-
then, right?
Well,
I think junior year, you were a year ahead of me.
Yeah, maybe.
You may have been there or a first year out. It was 1994 and 5.
Yeah, either I
when they
just
pulled-
left or I was my last year.
Yeah. And, you know, by that time, I knew everybody.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I knew everybody or everybody knew me. Always had a girlfriend, you know, somewhere like, you know, and just doing my thing. And if you needed to get some weed, yeah, I could find some weed for you.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I think we were even experiencing with some hallucinogens at that point. You know, some LSD, but it was few and far between. You know, I mean, shit. None of us had jobs. You know, I'm doing chores around the house for $1 or $2 just so I can, you know, buy some pot.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it was in the grand scope of things, it was pretty innocent. You know, and Aaron Gross approaches me one day and is like, you know, dude, have you seen the new guy? And I'm like, yeah, I've seen him. And he looked like a snitch to me. You know,
Yeah.
he looked like a narc. You know, like, I think that's what we
does the
call him
narc
back
look
then.
like?
It just looked like he'd tell on you for something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't think he was a cop.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? I wasn't thinking anything like that. I was just like, dude, if I get this guy a bag of weed, he's going to get caught with it. He looked
Yeah.
dumb
yeah.
and he looked like he would tell on you. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
I got you.
And that was a narc, you know? You know, and at the same time, you know, I had figured out that I'd started skipping school to go out to Great Falls and smoke weed and hang out. And
Mm-hmm.
and I figured out that if I skip school, that they'll just put me in school restriction.
Which is
Like they finally stopped suspending me.
yeah, yeah.
Because, you know, I mean, okay, I'm going to skip school one day. I don't want to be at school anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to skip school one day and then you're going to catch me, give me 3 days off with all of my homework.
Yeah, yeah.
Like-
Thank you.
That's like a vacation. Like,
Yeah.
I'll take it. You know, and they finally figured out that I caught on to that. So they started putting me in the in-school restriction, which we had those trailers.
I
Oh,
was there a couple times.
Yeah.
Me
And,
and Amy Springman a couple times.
yeah.
I get in trouble
Yeah.
in there too.
Yeah. And you know, it is what it is, you know,
Uh-huh.
like when I walked into class one day, into in-school restriction one day, and these guys were breaking up LSD on the desk. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You know, put that away. You know what I mean? What are you doing? He goes, oh, no, it's cool. It's cool. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yes.
Put that away. What are you doing? And he's like, no, it's cool. It's cool. And I looked over and the in-school restriction teacher is like, Watson, or Cameron, just sit down. And I'm like, this dude's watching this go on? Like,
Oh wow.
okay. And I sit down and I'm like, I'm at a loss at this point. You know what I mean? Like, because
Oh, yeah.
you know, there's like this guy just saw it. It's like, what's going on here? You know, and it's the first couple of periods of class, so I'm stoned. You know, my friend looks at me. He's like, dude, wait till we go to the bathroom. Wait till the bathroom break. And I'm like, okay. And we go in there, and the ISS teacher would stand outside the bathroom while we're in there smoking weed and
Is this the
smoking
big
cigarettes.
tall guy with the mustache?
Mr. Older, yep,
I know.
yep.
Dude, when they take you for a walk around the track because
Yeah.
you're in that trailer all day.
Yeah,
And we would just go. There was an outhouse out there, not an outhouse, but a Don's John,
yeah.
and we just take turns going in there.
Yeah.
That way,
Yeah,
you were just
and-
blitzed and in school, so you didn't care.
No, not at all, man. You know, got your work done too. You know what I mean?
I heard
Like,
that guy got in a lot of trouble.
yeah. He actually
Anyway.
gave me a ride home from school one day. My
Got
ride
fucked
had
up
left
with him,
me.
probably.
I can't remember if he smoked, but I was ripping bongets in my mom's kitchen, and he was sitting there talking to me.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, he
um,
didn't care.
yeah. And shortly after that, I think is when maybe Jim Houston started coming around, and Aaron gave me his number, and I'm like, dude, I'm not getting that guy anything. No.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And that's just the way it was, you know? And, you know, and I didn't do things like that. I wasn't making money off of anything like that. Like,
Yeah,
I got
I
you a
know.
bag of weed because I want a bud out of it. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like,
Just to float
that's it.
yourself.
I'm not a drug dealer, you
Right,
know?
right.
And I guess at that point, see, it'd been a couple of months, and Jason Provost shows up at my house with this guy, this Jim Houston. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know, Jason lived right down the street from me. He was part of the little Cascades crew. And,
hmm
you know, and I opened the door and he's like, hey, man, we're going to smoke a joint. You want to come with us? And I'm like, no, I don't. I've got something I need to do, you know what I mean? Or something. And they left, you know, and at that point I'm thinking, well, I'll get in touch with Jason later. And if this
See
guy
how it went.
smoked, then he's probably okay, you know? And so I got in touch with Jason. He was like, oh yeah, he's super cool. Yeah, we smoked a joint, ate and gave him the roach, you know, and all that. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. So next time I saw Jim, I'm like, hey man, like somebody told me you might need some weed, you know? And that's how that relationship began. You know, I would call him in the mornings and he would like, listen, man, do you think your dad can call me in for school today? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll talk to him and I'll have him call in, you know, and I'd skip school with this guy, you know, and we'd go out to like Great Falls or something and you know, smoke, and we're all a bunch of potheads, you know, that's what we did. We smoked weed all the time. We went to school, we smoked weed.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and of course, you know, every time I got him a bag, you know, let me get a bite out of that. Yeah, he kind of give me a hard time sometimes, but I'm like, nah, dude, I'm not doing it. I just went through all this, you know, and I'm using my mom's house phone, you know, this we didn't have cell phones and stuff like that,
Right,
you know, like sometimes I spend 3 hours trying to find just, you know, 7 grams of marijuana.
I
you
called
know?
it a tax. Look, it's just a tax.
Yeah, you know, and that's just the way it went.
Yeah.
And then one day, man, and this guy asked me, I got him LSD, you know, and occasionally Love Boat would come around, which is that PCP on marijuana. Or the green PCP on, you know, we're right next to Washington, D.C., and that's real big in D.C.
Yeah.
But he would ask me for it, and I'd be like, well, I'll see what I can do. You know, and I'd spend hours on the phone and find it for him, you know. But, you know, I wouldn't have gotten, you know, he wanted, I mean, dude, you know, looking back on it now, it was entrapment. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, because you would have never got involved in anything that heavy.
Right.
I never knew you to do that. I didn't do that. I knew people that did, and that's why I didn't do it, because look at those people, man.
Right. You know,
that's PCP, man.
And then I guess the last time I saw Jim out, well, before I found out he was a Loudoun County cop, he had called me up and asked me for a quarter pound of marijuana. And I'm like, man, a quarter pound, like, I don't.
I never even bought that before.
It takes me 3 hours to find a quarter bag. You know what I mean? Like, I'll see what I can do. And I found these couple guys, and Jim drove over to my house. This was in the Washington Post also. In the Washington Post, it states, because they wrote an article on the 1995 Broad Run drug bust, if you Google it.
Wow.
And in the article, it says that we lured this cop to a vacant parking lot, and we robbed him at gunpoint. Is what it says.
Jeez.
So, and I'll get to the charges here in a second. It's amazing to me. So we meet up. Jim brings his car over to my mom's house, and we hop in this other vehicle. We drive to the back of Cascades, and we pull on the side of the road. And these guys are like, "Listen, this guy's house is right around the corner. He doesn't know you. Can you just wait right here?" You know, and I've grown up with these guys, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then Jim looks at me, I look at him, I'm like, yeah, just give him the money. It's cool. Yeah, it's $250. And we got out of the car and waited on the sidewalk. You know, these guys never come back. You know, we waited there for like a half an hour, and I'm like, oh my God, like, we just got to dirt. Like, Jim's getting all antsy and upset, and I look like an asshole, you know, and I'm like, man. Yeah, I'm like, well, let's just go back to my mom's house. You know what I mean? And I had to walk with him from the back of Cascades back to my mom's house, where he got in his car and he left. You know, and the whole time he's blaming me for everything. I'm like, dude, I don't do that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't do that to you, man. You know? Well, didn't see him again. And then I think it was May 13th of 1995. I was suspended from school. I just gotten back from my first Love's house. I snuck out and went over to see her, Auburn Peterson. She lived right down the street. And I just got back in, and I was suspended from school, and there's a knock at my door, you know, and I opened it up, and it's my mom, like right in front of me. You know, she's in her terry cloth bathrobe, and it's a little bit late in her morning routine for her to still be in her bathrobe. So that was my first alarm bell that went off. And then I looked over her shoulder, and there's like 10 cops all the way down the hall. And she's like, there's some people here to see you. And I was like, oh my God. And they stepped past her, you know, can you put some clothes on, Cam? And I'm like, yeah, sure. No problem. Coming to find out that, you know, I'm busted, you know, and at the same time, they're rounding up all the other kids. Matt Deal, you know, and all these other cats that, you know, we hung out with. Any Jason Provost, he got wrapped up for giving that joint roach to the cop. He got charged for that. And this is Virginia, back in the day. So, these are, these are drug charges, like, and I get down to the station and I find out that I have 4 felony counts of marijuana distribution, 1 LSD distribution, 1 PCP distribution, armed robbery, conspiracy to commit abduction, and use of a firearm to commit a felony at this point. And
sounds like some extras thrown in there.
Oh my goodness, and I've never been arrested before in my entire life. You know what I mean? Like,
so you go from nothing to that.
To
all
that,
in one.
my junior year of high school. I was a little skateboard pothead. Like delinquent but not harmful. You know what I mean?
I never saw anybody with guns aside from guys that lived out where I did in the country, and those were
right,
like
Narcola and stuff like that. And so I go to juvie, and I remember I was sitting in juvenile detention, and I finally come out of my little cell or whatever because they're having movie night or whatever, and it's Shawshank Redemption.
Really?
Nice.
Yes. And I was sitting there looking at this movie, and I just burst into tears. You know what I mean? Like, I'm fucking prison. Like, oh my God. I'm just watching this movie just in horror. You know what I mean? And I didn't know what was going to happen, and after, a week or 10 days, like they moved me to Springwood, which is a rehab center out in Leesburg. I went to court. They moved me from the juvie place to the Springwood place so I could, be in residential rehab rather than, jail.
Yeah.
While I'm going through this court process. And, that's where everything changed, man. Like, it was never the same after that. The song that strikes me is Offspring's The Kids Aren't All Right.
Yeah.
I actually ran an ad on Facebook about a year ago, just blasting Loudoun County. I was like, here's your song, Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, and it changed everyone's lives, and we were kids. We didn't know who was telling on who had done what, and all that. And I signed a plea agreement. They dropped the armed robbery and kidnapping charges and all that stuff, which is what he had come up with, because those guys ran off with the money. That's what this dude came up with.
All the false stuff.
And horrible, man. The drug charges I pled guilty to, but it was on a deferred finding, which meant that if I stayed out of trouble for the year of probation, completed that, they would dismiss the charges. I completed the 97 days in rehab, and I went back to Broad Run for my senior year of high school. And that was amazing. Kids are mean, man. That's all I can say. You know what I mean? Like, me, Auburn stayed with me, and there were quite a few times where we had to run in her eclipse. People were chasing us. There were lots of snitch being thrown around. There was lots of this being thrown around, and
because you were back.
Yeah, and even for all their hard work in that situation, I don't have a juvenile record. Which I guess is a blessing. But it made it really hard. We were terrified everywhere we went. Auburn was terrified for me. I was scared. I started carrying a Marine issue K-bar with me everywhere. And one night, we went to remove this guy from this girl's house party that was causing problems, and got him removed. And as we're going back to Auburn's car, my K-bar was underneath the front seat, and cops pull in right behind us. Immediately, and of course I took the blame for everything that was in the car. And they charged me with concealed weapon. On my 18th birthday, So now I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? We made some mistakes in that, and it got null prost. But as soon as I'm sitting in the Loudoun County jail, or Leesburg jail, and here comes Jim Houston walking in, and he looks at me and he goes, well, and he had always told me, like, let me back up a little bit. While I'm on probation, going to school, doing my thing, Jim harassed me and my family the entire time. He showed up one time with a case of beer. He pulled up to the back of my mom's house, which was an apartment complex, and wanted me to come talk to him, and I'm like, he's a cop, you know what I mean? I'm already have to go talk to him, you know what I mean? And so I go out there, and we sat there talking, and he was trying to get me to snitch on people, man. you know, and he went from when I wouldn't do that, he would go back to, if you don't, I know what you're up to, and I know what you're doing, and if you don't stop, I'm going to put you in prison, and da 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 da. I wasn't doing anything, man. Like I was still trying to probably sneak some marijuana or something past the drug test, but I wasn't doing anything. And one night he even drove me past this dude's house down the street that lived in our neighborhood and went and picked up his trash with me in the car and threw his trash in his trunk. He was convinced this guy was doing something. And I'm like, dude, just take me home. Like I'm not getting involved in all this. He came and had a meeting with me, my mom, and my stepdad. Wanting me to tell on people. And my mom is looking at Mike like, what do we do? My mom, this is the Loudoun County cop, someone we should trust. And that was my mom's attitude. Mike was like, no. Absolutely not. Do not talk to this man. Do not make any moves with this man. And one thing I don't think people realize too is that my stepdad was an active federal bank examiner at the time. That this Loudoun County cop is running an undercover investigation on his home. I don't even think that that's legal. I didn't find that out until years later, that you can't do that. My stepdad, has had to testify, in DC, some serious matters. And, so these are things that I found out as an adult, as I looked into it, and in regards to that situation recently, 3 years ago, I filed with the Virginia ACLU on Loudoun County Public Schools and Loudoun County Sheriff's Office for destroying our lives, man. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know if it was going to do anything, or at least destroying my life. It put me on a path to where I was ostracized from my neighborhood.
Just made everything worse.
Yeah. Real or imagined, there were places I couldn't go. There were dramas that I had to put up with that I shouldn't have, that no 17-year-old kid should have to. And I mean, it still affects me, what are we really 30 years later, I still think about that man. I hate that man.
Yeah.
You could have busted us with a bag of weed, put us on probation.
Call it a day.
Yeah, call it a day. Lesson learned. You wanted to make your bones off of a bunch of kids, and then lie about it in the end. They lied about the amounts, they lied about the abduction, they lied about the firearm.
Yeah.
Like all that, and, of course, my parents have always, held the belief that, for the most part, cops are good.
Right.
If you get charged with something, it's probably because you were doing something,
Yeah.
Which for the most part, I mean, these guys are, but, it changed our lives, and so I decided to go ahead and file with the ACLU on them. Shortly after that, my Facebook started getting logged into from Ashburn, Virginia, on my device, on my phone. I'm in Colorado. There's no reason for me to be in Ashburn, and lots of weird things were coming by, happening. A truck drove past me, someone actually leaning out of the vehicle and taking photographs of me at a bus stop, as I'm leaving the gym, and I feel that it was probably, it's direct retaliation for filing those complaints.
Oh, okay.
On Loudoun County Public Schools and the Sheriff's Office, and Loudoun County Public Schools is dirty. They've done a lot of.
It got worse after that, man, with the whole guy getting the rape in the bathroom and everything else, and they covered that up. Yeah, my mom was telling me about that. Yeah.
Like, and
it just seems like there was tremendous pressure for this guy to make something happen. And I guess
he was a new cop. Yeah, he was a new cop, from my understanding. And they were so, I read that article recently, and I've posted it on my Facebook as well, because I was thinking back, I just got done facing a first-degree attempted murder charge, and so I'm looking back at all this and I'm trying to fight it right now. I'll get into that a little bit later. And I'm looking at what were these people possibly even going to try to prosecute me with? And then, I come upon this Washington Post article, and these people out here would pull something like that. And it would have been lies, cop lies out of a news article, used in my trial, but, back to the ostracization, there was no more baseball. I didn't graduate high school. I was considered a senior, but I had senior privileges, but I wasn't going to graduate because when they arrested me my junior year, it was right before the final exams, so I couldn't take my exams. And they didn't bust any upperclassmen whatsoever in that whole thing. It was all underclassmen. I guess they didn't want to mess up these upperclassmen's, college chances or what have you. I don't know.
Crazy.
Yeah, no upperclassmen. So here I am, haven't graduated. By this time, I'm living with Auburn at her parents' house down the street. My parents are fed up with me. I'd started drinking. The only way I could make it to school was if I was drunk. And Auburn would pick me up in the morning and make me go to school, and it just went like that for a couple months. Things were not getting any better. And my mom called up and said, listen, my mom got me good too. For my own good, but she called up and said, listen, my mom called me up and said, listen, we'll let you move back into the house, but we want you to go back to school. And I was like, Mom, I'm not going back to Broad Run. I'm not going to do it. She's like, no, we've got some brochures for private schools. You can move back into the house, take your time. We'll find you a private school and you can go there and complete your high school. And so, that's what I did. I love my parents. I was, it got to the point where I lived right down the street and I would watch my mom drive past and go to work every day, and it just broke my heart, man. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't act right. I couldn't get along with Mike. I couldn't get along with my mom, and it just sucked, and so when given the opportunity, I went back and my mom had an Oak Hill Academy brochure. They have the #1 high school basketball team in the nation. I don't know if they do now, but at the time, they're called the Gold Team, and I play basketball, but I wasn't going to play in school. Right. But, I thought it was kind of cool. Like, people like Jerry Stackhouse graduated from there, Ron Mercer, and a few other, I think Jeff McGinnis. So my mom's like, just, pack a bag. Let's go take a look at this place. It's in Mouth of Wilson, Virginia, which is like one of the most southwest points of Virginia you can get.
All in the corner.
So I get out there and there is nothing. This school is in the middle of horse country, like rolling hills. The nearest town is not something that I would consider even going into. You know what I mean? Like, for what?
It's like a bakery.
And I just looked at her and I was like, nope, not going to happen. She goes, okay, well, how you getting on?
Ooh. It's almost like a surprise intervention almost.
And I was like, oh, no, you didn't.
Wow.
She's like, and so here I am, and I was like, I still have one last shot. I was like, I'm calling my girlfriend. She's going to get me home. I'm not staying out here. And so I called and Auburn was like, let me talk to my mom real quick. And her mom was like, nope, he's exactly where he needs to be. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, they got me, and so here I am in Oak Hill, and did my thing in Oak Hill, and Auburn came out and visited me. We went on some really cool trips. We went whitewater rafting up in Maine. Then first we went to a fish show in Charlotte. That was really cool. Stayed with my grandparents and then drove all the way up to Maine. That was our spring break. We went whitewater rafting with some of her family and came back down. And we were still, like I went to the fish show and I came back with like $4,000 worth of drugs.
Shit.
Like that's what, you're going to the fish show, and I didn't get in trouble, like most of the kids had been caught smoking by that time. So they weren't allowed to go out on their breaks. So they're like, here, take this, pick this up for me.
Oh shit.
And I'm like, good Lord. And I'm like, all right. So I spent like 2 hours in the parking lot before the show, got everybody their drugs, and brought it back, and we sold cigarettes, like I would get a couple cartons of Newports and they were going for $5 a pack at the time. Yeah. And I would sit on mine, wait till everybody dried out. And now it's $50 a pack, and people were paying it, and I was just delinquent, man. Like I was making my grades, I'm a smart dude. Like I could step into a class and somehow it just absorbs into me. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to study.
You were a good student. I remember that.
Yeah. And long story short, my roommate, got in trouble and he got me in trouble. I got kicked out. Okay. At this point, and they were pissed. They were angry. The Dean Bowen came in and came into my English class, took me up to my room and said, pack your stuff.
Oh man.
And I'm like, dude, and like mean too. Like I thought this guy was gonna beat me up or something, you know. And so I'm packing all my stuff, and by this time I'm 18, you know. And he threw me in his truck. Well, he put me in his truck and drove me off campus and was like, "All right, where do you want to go?" And I'm like, "You haven't called my parents." He's like, "I don't have to call anybody. You're 18 years old."
Oh,
I was like, "Oh my goodness," you know. And at this time, me and my dad are kind of estranged. You know, he was an alcoholic, and I was trying to, you know, I was having my own issues, and then dealing with his alcoholism. You know, I hadn't really spoken to him much, and I'm like, shit, mom's not going to take me back. And I'm like, just call my dad. You know, I mean, just call my dad. You know, and my dad was there immediately. You know, and came and got me, and I went to stay with my dad, and you know, that wasn't going to work. We were butting heads, you know, constantly. And so I moved in with my grandparents. This was in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I moved into Providence Country Club, you know, and in a $1 million home with my grandparents, you know, and I stuck out like a sore thumb, you know. All these rich kids, you know, like we came from a pretty well-off area, but I mean, these kids' families had serious money.
Yeah, generational wealth.
Yeah, my grandfather, you know, was a career Marine as well, you know, and you know, it was weird, man. You know, so I made a trip up to back to Virginia, picked up whatever marijuana I needed, you know, and came back down, and here I am in this giant neighborhood with all these rich people that I don't want to talk to. You know, my life is just crap, you know. So I remember I'm sitting at the end of this unfinished road one day, smoking some weed, and this guy walks up on me, this other kid, and I'm like, yeah, who are you? You know, it turns out, you know, we talked for a little bit. He smokes weed too, and his name was Colin, and we got to know each other. And he would come by and knock on my door, like, hey man, what's up? What are you doing? You know, and take me around to meet his friends. And so I started meeting people, you know. Yeah. And then my parents, you know, my grandparents. You know, we're, you know, in and out of town constantly, you know, just doing their thing, living their lives. You know, they went to Alaska this time, and they would leave me in the house, you know, like it's cool, you know. And this one time I'm like, all right, my parents are going to Alaska, so we're throwing a house party. You know, and we did. Like the first day, it was like 15 people. Second day, it was like 40 people. Third day, we're getting kegs, you know. And then the fourth day, we did it again. And that's when the cops showed up. You know what I mean? Like, and everybody runs, you know what I mean? But they didn't run far, you know, like they ran to like the next door neighbors' houses. So here I am out back pouring out this keg, and everybody's sitting on the roofs of the neighbors' houses just watching me. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah. Suck, man, you left me with these cops. You know what I mean? And you know, my parents, you know, my grandparents get back, and by this time, you know, they're upset. You know, yeah, and you got to go stay with your dad again. You know what I mean? Like, and so yeah, that's how it went. And then I think at one point, after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going back to Virginia. You know, and I'm going to figure out something. You know, I'm 18 years old, getting ready to turn 19. So I drove back up and visited my parents. And they were going to the beach, and I was like, okay, well, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, when you guys go to the beach, I'm going to hang out in your house. And that's what I did. You know, they left for the beach. I acted like I was leaving too, and they left, and I stayed, and we hung out. They were going to be gone for 2 weeks. I had more time to figure out what I learned to do. You know, my grandparents are trying to get me to come home by this point, you know, and I'm like, no, I'm staying, you know, and got involved with some people that I didn't need to get involved with. And they talked me into mailing some methamphetamine. I allowed these two gentlemen to mail a softball sized package of peanut butter crank to my mom's house. And the package got there, and it was there for like 15 minutes, and then it left, and I never saw it again. You know, and at this point, you know, I'm a mess. You know, like I'm on drugs. You know, in my mom's house, and they're at the beach. You know, and the neighbor called my parents, and my mom came home early. You know, and like, what are you doing in our home? You know, and you know, so I got kicked out. Went and stayed with my drug dealer at that point in time. He would also help set up this meth package or whatever. And that's where things started getting weird. Things started getting really weird at this point, you know, and I'm telling these guys like, hey, listen, we're in trouble. You know what I mean? Like they're following us. There are people everywhere. And they're like, man, you need to get off that stuff, man. I'm like, dude, I'm not doing this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it happens when it's sober. It happens when I'm on it. There are people everywhere, dude. And nobody's listening to me. So I said, screw it one night, and I left. I hopped in my little 98 Neon, but I drove back down to my grandparents' house, in the middle of the night. It was like, I can't do this. Like these guys are going to get busted.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm thinking if I could just get away, I'll be okay. So I moved back in with my grandparents under the condition that I get my GED. That's like the main thing that I need to do. And I'm like, perfect. I'm a wreck. My face is all chewed up. I'm skinny. And so I started getting my shit together. Went and took my GED, didn't study nothing, and I almost aced it. The first time my grandfather took me to Central Piedmont, I went into the front and I went out the back and didn't take the test at all. I'm going somewhere else. I don't know where I went. So of course he's upset about this. He's a very stoic man. He didn't yell and scream. He didn't do anything like that, which made it, you knew you were in trouble. I think he was a colonel in the Marines, so you knew you were in trouble when he started speaking, and so, and we reschedule the test, and I go back, and I go in the front, kind of hang out for a little bit, and I'm heading towards the back door. By this time, he'd already pulled around back, and he's waiting for me.
Oh, nice.
I'm on the back door. He's like, no, you're not. We're not doing this. You know what I mean? So I had to turn around and go in and take my GED, and I almost aced it.
Yeah.
Like there at this point, the counselors at the school, the community college are talking, listen, if you do a year here, you can go to MIT. You can do this, you can do that. Like the world is your oyster type stuff, and I'm like, I want to play baseball, my whole baseball career was jacked. Like I still got that in my heart. Like that's what I want to do, and so I started going to Central Piedmont, as a psych. I guess psychology was going to be my major. I don't think, can you have a major your freshman year? I don't know.
Oh, you can pick your major, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. You be on
track.
I'm on track.
I was going to go psychology. So I started doing that. And then one morning, I wake up and there's a knock at my door, at my grandparents' door, and they're, of course, they're out of town. And, I'm like, who is this? And it's a giant house, so I walk all the way down to the front door, open it up, and it's a yard full of United States Marshals.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that was not what I was expecting. And I'm like, can I help you? And they're like, are you Stephen Cameron Watson? I said, yes, sir. And they're like, well, you're under arrest. And I took a step back and I was like, for what? It'd been, I think almost a year at this point since I've been in Virginia.
Yeah.
And they're like, you don't remember August of 1997, son? And I went, oh, God. I mean, that's when we mailed the package. The package was received at my mom's house, and so I made some phone calls and all that. And it went down, to the federal courthouse, got a $50,000 unsecured bond. My girlfriend at the time picked me up and took me back to actually, we went out to eat. And I'm a mess at this point. It's federal, I have federal charges.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's over. Like it was just starting to get good and everything's over, and, sitting there crying in my food, and I had to go talk with her parents, because by this time, her parents, our daughter is hanging out with some guy who's got federal charges. Who is this man?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I talked with them and worked everything out. Everything was fine, and went on pretrial for, the feds.
Mm-hmm.
And was making these trips, back up to Virginia to check in and come back to North Carolina and all that. And by this time, my whole family, I was full blown alcoholic, and they were like, we're just going to get you an apartment. Nobody can handle you. I wasn't violent or anything. I was just
drunk all the time.
Drunk. Nobody wants to be around a drunk. And especially watching me, they didn't want to, they couldn't, it hurt them so much to watch me just spiral, so they got me my own apartment, and I lived in this little shitty apartment, for my pretrial. And something. Have you ever seen that movie, The 25th Hour, with Edward Norton, where he gets busted as a drug dealer? And
oh yeah, I've seen it, but it's been a while.
yeah, he's trying to figure out who screwed him over. Was it his girlfriend he loved so much, or his friends, or whatever? That's kind of what it reminded me of, because I didn't know who had done what. I didn't really know what was going to happen. I knew I was facing at least 5 years in a federal penitentiary, and was like, what, I didn't know what happened, and I remember I threw a house party my last night there, everybody came, and all that stuff. And we drank all night long, and my dad pulled up that morning, and at the end of that movie, his dad pulls up and picks him up and takes him to prison. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
And that was kind of, what it was like. My dad picked me up. There was a 6-pack in the car.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he was like, come on, because I was going to sentencing.
Yeah.
We had worked out a plea agreement for 30 months incarceration, fed time, with the possibility of enrolling in the ICC federal boot camp, the intensive confinement center boot camp, which is a 6-month program.
I would have done that for sure.
And I did. Yeah. I did. And so I get into the federal system. After 30 days, they transferred me to Lewisburg in Pennsylvania. They've got the big house there, but I just pulled up to the big house on a bus, and they walked me across the street to the camp right there, where 2 of my co-defendants were waiting there, with a pack of cigarettes and the lowdown on what was happening and all that. And you could still smoke in the federal system at that point. And I started working in the kitchen and waiting for my turn to go into the boot camp, which was, part of that compound. And it came time, I went in on Charlie team. And I think after about a month and a half, I had some issues with my ankles. For some reason, my ankles had swollen almost gout-like, and I couldn't do anything. I could barely get them in my boots. Mm-hmm. And at this point, they're telling me I'm having to lay in on the rack and watch the team go marching past, which is never something you want to see.
Yeah.
And thinking these people are going to make me go do my time if I don't heal up. I don't know what to do, and finally that time came, like, listen, if you can't do the program, we're going to list you as medically unfit and you're going to go do your time. And I begged them. I was like, let me go over to the camp, heal up over Christmas, and I'll start over. You know what I mean? I know I've been here almost 2. I'll start over. I'll do anything you guys want. It was the difference between doing, 9 months and 30, or 28, because fed time's 85%, So that's what they let me do. I went over there, and as I'm at the federal camp, I started paying attention to these guys that were coming in, and whether or not they were going over to the boot camp. Because I wanted to get them ready, like, listen, guys, this is how you do a left face. This is how you do a right face. This is about face. This is how you march. This is what PT is going to be like, because it broke me off when I got there. Yeah. Like, I didn't, PT and all this marching and all this other stuff. I didn't know anything about that. I'm a tough little dude, even at my worst, but, and I wanted to get these guys set. They're going to be on my team. So I want to make sure our team's okay.
Sure.
Because the more you mess up your stuff, the harder they're going to hit you,
right.
And so we got over there, and within the first week, I get called into the team captain's office. I was on Delta 12, and I'm the team captain now, and I just looked at him, and he was like, can you handle it? And I was like, yes, sir. And I didn't know if I could handle it or not. I'm 19 years old. These are grown men. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to listen to me.
Oh, yeah, they will.
And they didn't, they didn't listen to me at all. And we started getting hit, but I met every morning with the team leader, and kind of let the guys know, hey, listen, this is what he's expecting. This is what we talked about, helping the guys shine their boots, helping them learn how to do whatever was necessary to try to get these people off of our asses, and which was impossible. But, they give you the idea that if you do everything perfect, we're going to leave you alone, and I know you're not, but, it got to the point, it got to the point where, I needed help, so I paid attention to the little cliques in the team, and I was like, I want that guy, I want that guy, and I want that guy,
right.
That'll bring everybody together, and so I made the suggestion to my team leader, and I got it. I was on a team for, there were there were actually four cops on my team. They got 4 jail cops that had gotten in trouble. I got 2 of those guys, you know, as the team leaders, and then some really smart dude named Amadeo, you know, like white collar crime or something. And we started doing our thing, man, and we kicked ass.
Yeah,
we kicked ass. Like the average, I think success rate. You know, you might have 64 guys, like 48 may complete.
Yeah.
You know, I think we had 62 graduate, you know, out of I think 64. And we only lost 2 guys because they got other charges. We didn't have one single person quit.
Wow.
You know, and we had our graduation ceremony. Both my parents came, you know, and I was on the drill team, you know, doing that crazy Charlie Sheen stuff, you know, like you know, I'd been calling cadence. I was running a 5.5 minute mile. You know, like doing the whole deal, you know. And at that point, my dad had gotten me a job in North Carolina. That was the only way they were going to send me back to Virginia unless I was gainfully employed in North Carolina. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. How do you expect me to complete this task? You know? But my dad hooked it up. He had a friend named Bill Truitt, and he got me into a woodworking shop, you know, so they transferred me, you know, which is perfect for me. I mean, I grew up building launch ramps and skateboards.
Hands-on, something to do,
Yeah. I could work in a carpentry shop, you know, building cabinets. And that's what I did. Completed the halfway house, went on to house arrest, which I did at my dad's house. That was the non-res portion of the federal halfway house, and made it onto federal probation. Which was 3 years. And I started doing that and was still staying at my dad's house. And he told me one day, he was like, listen, man, I got to talk to you. No, I was staying at my dad's, and I'd met a girl named Whitney, and we got our own apartment. You know, and in North Carolina, you can get a 1-bedroom for $550 at this point in time. Well, that's just 2021. No, excuse me, 2001. So we put it together and we got this place. You know, it was our own little spot, man. You know, and it was kind of cheesy. Like we had like one wall of our dining room was a giant mirror, you know, and just, yeah, but it was our spot, you know, and we were paying for it ourselves. She worked at Gold's Gym. I went to school and worked at, I think, Michael's Arts and Crafts by this time, you know, and my dad called me up one day and was like, listen, I need to talk to you. I'm like, okay. I went over to the house and he's like, I want you to go back to school. And I was like, there's no way I can do that. You know, I've got to work to pay for this apartment. He goes, that's what I want to talk to you about. My grandfather had passed away while I was in boot camp. Yeah, I got that phone call one day, and yeah, you need to go to the counselor's office. And I'm like, okay. You know, it's my dad. And he's like, your grandfather passed. You know, he had battled lung cancer. He and my dad are both Camp Lejeune Marines. And my dad's had cancer. You know, he just beat his 2nd or 3rd cancer. My grandfather, you know, finally lung cancer got him 30 years after he quit smoking. You know, and I'll never forget that day too. Just to move on that note, like, they said, you can have the rest of the day off. And I was like, I don't want the rest of the day off. I was like, can I just have one person to talk to for a little bit? So I grabbed that smart little dude Amadeo, and I was like, come talk to me, man. And we walked around the track for a little bit, and I got my shit back together, back squared away, and went back with the team. You know, like, we got shit to do. You know? So that being said, my dad's like, your grandfather left you some money. And as long as you're enrolled in school full time and making a C or above, your bills are paid. And if you need anything extra, we can work something out. You know, I'm like, amazing. You know, so I quit my job immediately. You know? I enrolled back in school, you know, and I went to the Art Institute of Charlotte. You know, if I'm going to go to school, I'm going to go to the school. I want to, you know, I'm going to do some graphic design. Like, I've always been an artist, you know, so that's what I did, you know, but I hadn't learned any real responsibility yet. To me, you know, I mean, it's basically free money. So I did the littlest amount I could at school. You know, I started partying more again, you know, alcohol being the demon, and slowly started just falling out of school, you know, and it's weird too, you know, like having these apartments and living in these nice apartment complexes where everybody's got to work their ass off to pay for their apartment. And here I am, this young kid with a brand new 2001 Mustang in his own garage and a corner 1-bedroom overlooking the pool.
Yeah.
What the hell is he do all day long? You know, I didn't do anything all day long. You know what I mean? Like, we're hung out, you know? And that in and of itself kind of set me apart, you know? Like, people don't respect that. You know, they just don't. You know? And So long story short, I'm on my third year of federal probation, and I'd violated by this time. I switched my PO. I had a new guy. He didn't like me. I didn't like him. And I was young. So if I didn't like you, I wasn't going to do what you said, no matter what, And so, I got into court, and it was something egregious this guy had done. I looked at the judge, and I was like, he told me, he was like, we're going to reinstate your probation today. And I was like, excuse me, sir, what do I need to do to get rid of this guy right here? Because you're going to see me again, And he looked at my paperwork. He was like, can you finish out 90 days in jail? And that'll be it. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I think I had 67 days in or something. So I finished out 90, got out, got rid of the last 9 months of my Fed probation. And I'm free and clear, man. And I'm still talking to my dad. My dad's doing this thing, and so I decided, I'm going to move back to Virginia. I'm going to give Virginia a try again. So I enrolled in the Chubb Institute in Reston for computer technology, and got an apartment in Cascades Overlook.
Oh, jeez.
Full circle, man. You know what I mean? Like minutes walk from my mom's house. Now I'm living here, and drunk. Just drunk. That's all it was. Just drunk. From the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, drunk.
Damn.
And it led to 2 DUIs within 30 days.
Oh.
I blew a .43 in my second DUI. It felt fine. It felt fine to drive. I was on my way to dinner, and
what were you drinking? Just liquor all day?
Beer. I did that with beer. That's how much beer I was drinking.
That's a lot of beer. Jeez.
That's a lot of beer, man.
Yeah,
I hadn't started hard liquor yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was just a mess. I sold my car to CarMax because I got tired of pulling off Route 7 every time a cop got behind me. And it's not like they didn't know me around there, and so I got rid of the car. And then when I got rid of the car, it was like, I got to go. You know what I mean? Like, I think I hung out for another year or so, tried to date this girl for a little bit and didn't work out. So I went back to North Carolina and just tried to do whatever I could do. My dad got me a hotel room for 3 weeks, and that was it. Like, you're going to figure it out for yourself in this 3 weeks. And there's not, what else do you want us to do for you?
Right.
And I didn't really have an argument. They've done everything they possibly could for me. And I'm just not getting it, And so at the end of this 3 weeks, I moved out, this hotel, and, just kind of bummed around from hotel to hotel. My mom would float me money through Western Union. I'd get hotel rooms, and did that whole thing for, a few months. And then finally I went to the Salvation Army Rehab Center, the ARC in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was in 2010. And not really out of a sense because I didn't want to get sober. I also didn't want to be homeless.
Yeah.
That was the main thing. So I can go here for 6 months, you know what I mean? And the place seemed okay. Great food. They had like all this stuff, and free clothing, I'm going to go stay here, and I'll figure out something in the meantime, and that was another milestone. That's when I started realizing that I liked lifting weights. I've got a picture on Facebook. My chest is out to here. I'm doing 1,000 push-ups a couple times a week and benching and doing all this other stuff, and staying sober, and the family's starting to come back, and life was going to get better. I got a job. I was like, you know what? I can cook. Let me apply for Marriott. They're looking for a cook. Why not? Chef Jean-Pierre Marichal calls me up one day, like, in his little French voice, wanted me to come in and interview. So I went in and I interviewed with him. And he was like, you know what? He was like, out of all these applications, I probably would not pick you. Like, I just wouldn't. Like, you don't have the experience. Your background is kind of shifty. I've got a federal felony at this point, And he's like, but that being said, that's precisely why I'm going to pick you. He was like, I see you're making changes in your life. And he was like, I would like to help you along that path. And so I started cooking at Marriott. I'm in downtown Charlotte, Marriott City Center.
Yeah.
Then this is an amazing story. So I started out as a fry cook. Now there's 3 outlets. There's Champions, which is like their sports bar. Yeah. There's Room Service. There's Cutter's Cigar Bar and Lounge, where like Michael Jordan would go in and do his thing, and then there's Savannah Red, which is their fine dining outlet that just won a James Beard Award, and all that big time stuff. And all the fine dining chefs are down to my left on the line, and then I'm pantry, and then the grill and all that's to my right. I'm basically, I'm the fry cook, well, not fry cook, but I'm the pantry guy, the salad guy, the dessert guy, the fry guy, and we would get our asses kicked.
Yeah, it's hard work, man.
80,000 people, on the streets for NASCAR, they're all coming in to get chicken wings, man, and I busted my ass, and did everything I was supposed to. But the plating on my salads, one of the fine dining chefs started taking notice of. My attention to detail. And he pulled me aside one day. His name was Chef William Brown, and we're still friends today. But he was like, listen, your attention to detail is amazing. He was like, if you ever thought about maybe cooking for Savannah Red, and I'm like, dude, I can't do that. You guys have culinary degrees, like we've got Johnson or Wales interns that come in, like I can show those people how to fry chicken wings and make salads. Like I got respect for these guys. Chefs I love some chefs.
Yeah.
He was like, no, I'm going to teach you how to do the garde manger position for Savannah Red. And I was like, man, all right. And he went and talked to JP, Chef Jean-Pierre, and he threw a fit. He was like, no, absolutely not. He doesn't have the background. He's doing great now. Just leave him where he is. And Billy's like, no. I'm the chef de cuisine, and I don't want him back there. So he took me under his wing, and 3 weeks later, here I am. I'm on the other side of the kitchen with the ovens, all the expensive shit, and cooking for I think 85 person seating, restaurant, Savannah Red, James Beard Award winning, all this. I got my chef code, I got all this on, and I'm like, I'm still kind of looking around like, how am I going to do this? It's one thing to do like a bunch of bar cooking and stuff, and then now it's this, But Billy kept telling me, dude, you can do this, man. Like, he's like, everything. I've taught you, everything, And then Jason Gray, I'll never forget, was my sous chef. And I would watch this guy pull sheet pans out of the oven with his bare hands.
Just used to it.
Yeah, and just sat him down, and I'm like, "What are you doing? There are gloves right there, bro. Like, just grab those." And he's like, "No, man." He's like, "Give me your lighter." I'm like, "No, I'm not giving you my lighter." He's like, "Give me your lighter." And I give it to him. He just sit there. I'm like, "Okay, that's enough, Jason. That's enough." And I have to snatch the lighter out of his hand. Like, dude, what is wrong with you?
Yeah,
you got the Obi-Wan Kenobi of sous chefs. You know what I mean? Like, nothing hurt this man. And then I had another chef Chuck Herrick, big barrel-chested guy, had a mohawk. And he would come in and I'm not big on eating organs, like there's way too many other parts of this animal that we can eat and enjoy. I'm just not down for this, but he was like, listen, part of your job is knowing what stuff tastes like. You don't have to eat it all the time, but you need to know what it tastes like. And I'm like, Chuck, I'm not eating that. I don't know what's behind your back, but I'm not eating that, And then he pulled it and he brought his hand out, and it's this veal knuckle with a straw stuck in the middle of the marrow. And he's like, take a sip. And I'm like, I'm not taking a sip of that.
Tastes good.
That's he's like, it's like meat butter. And I'm like, that sounds disgusting. And he's like, Cameron, you're going to drink this. And I was like, no, I'm not, Chuck. And he slowly reaches around me and grabs me and puts my head onto his shoulder. Okay, and starts stroking the back of my head. And I'm like, Chuck, please let go.
Yeah, this has gotten weird.
Take a sip, Cameron. And I'm like, okay. And now, of course, I took a sip. It wasn't that bad, but it's not something I'm going to order. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, that was my relationship with these guys. These guys are all culinary geniuses. And here I am, basically fucked my entire life up to this point, but have a golden opportunity, to really do something cool,
Yeah.
And they took an interest in me, and we had fun, and did that for, a year to garment mosaic position. My parents, my grandmother, they all got to come in and eat in the restaurant at the big table. They got to see me come out in my chef whites and
Nice.
And I'd come up with a dessert. I was responsible for making the sorbets and the ice creams. Yeah, I made those from scratch. I came up with the strawberry flavors.
Mhm.
Oh, excuse me, the flavors, sorbet flavors. I came up with a strawberry peppercorn, pink peppercorn, thing like, and Billy would encourage me. He's like, dude, take some things that you don't even know that you wouldn't think would go together, put them together, make it, taste it. You don't like it, make something else. And that's what I did all day long.
Mhm.
I got my prep done, and then I had my creativity, for the rest of the day. And that's how, we figured out things. I made my own Maker's Mark whiskey caramel. I did all kinds of stuff, man. And and it was cool. But the drinking started again.
Yeah.
The drinking started kicking in, and at that Marriott, there was this bar Tilt right across the street where if you get an inch of snow or 2 inches of snow in Charlotte, the whole city shuts down. You know what I mean? Like, it's major, and so Marriott would put us up in these $400 hotel rooms. Like, we'd get it for a day or two.
Yep.
So, we'd stay in these rooms and we'd all march over to this bar and everything and just get ripped, and stumble on back over to the hotel. And the hotel didn't care as long as you showed up for work, the next day. And I did that for a while. And one of the worst feelings on this planet, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, a lot of alcoholics can relate, is standing beside a fryer with a hangover. You know what I mean? It is one of the worst. It is hot. It is sticky. It is just, what did I do to myself all day long? You know what I mean? And eventually I ended up losing that job because of my drinking.
Oh, man.
And I just couldn't do it anymore, man. I couldn't show up to work on time. I was calling out, and I went back to rehab, back to the Salvation Army ARC. And I did this for a couple of years. I think I went there like 3 times, and I'd get my shit together. I played on the softball team where we actually went around the state whooping people's tails, man. We came back with a 4-foot tall trophy. I played shortstop, or third base, and we did our thing, But once I was out of that controlled environment, left to my own devices, I went back to drinking.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it went, and after I'd lost the job at Marriott, I managed to land, I had a good friend named Scott Smith, who actually works for Central Piedmont now. He was my roommate for most of the Marriott stuff. He let me rent a room from him, and super nice guy. He's into film production and editing, worked for the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, like super nice guy, really wanted me to get my shit together and was on my ass about my drinking. Like, dude, you are awesome. There's nothing you can't do. Just put the booze down, man.
Yeah.
He's a really positive influence, but I wasn't ready to quit drinking yet. And so I eventually ended up leaving his home, and I moved in. I found a lady on Craigslist named Billy Rodriguez. She was an ex-Vegas showgirl who was 7 years old and ran her own little internet business, and had a condo. So I rented a room from her. Super cool lady. We would sit there and drink vodka and watch Walking Dead, and I'd wake up in the morning and, help her go to these places, yard sales or whatever, and find product for her website.
Oh, okay.
We'd go to the UPS store in the morning, and I'd carry all the packages, and that was the relationship for a number of months. And she was like, you know what? I'm going to get you on the lease. And I'm like, Billy, they're not going to put me on the lease. This is South Park, Charlotte, like this is a pretty well-to-do neighborhood, and I've got a pretty decent felony, they're not going to do it. And she was like, yes, they will. And I was like, all right. And I'm thinking to myself, as soon as we have this meeting with these people, they're going to kick me out, like I just know it, this is going fine, but she was adamant. She wanted me on the lease. And I'm like, all right. So we go to this meeting, and of course they're like, nope, no way. And by the way, you've got 30 days to move out. And I'm like, and I'm not upset with her, at all. You can't even really, like Billy, she just didn't know, know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so at this point, I was already talking to a friend of mine in Colorado, and like what what he was doing, and he was my old college buddy. Like when I got arrested at my grandparents' house, they'd already been to the campus. Like the feds, raided my campus. I was going to Lewisburg College to play baseball and stuff at that point. And, and so last time he'd heard about me, the feds were looking for me all over the campus, So I'm talking to this guy and he's like, dude, come to Colorado. And I'm like, for what? I can get weed in North Carolina, man. He's like, weed's going to be legal. I'm like, I don't care. And he's like, seriously, come out here. I'll get you a job. I need a roommate. So I was like, all right, well, I got to move out of this place anyways. So I called my mom and she's like, I'm like, what do you think? And I'm pretty sure she's going to shut me down. She's like, do it. Yeah. I'm like, what? She's like, do it. And I was like, you're going to have to foot the bill for this for a little bit, right? And she's like, do it. I got you. And I'm like, all right, bet. And, I remember the last time I saw Billy, she had driven me to the airport in her little Red Ranger truck and we were both crying, and
crazy.
Here I am. I'm off to Colorado. Yeah. First time off the East Coast. This is 2012.
Okay.
And I get out here and my friend Josh and all that stuff, I get to his house and stuff and it's different. It is really different, and like I even made the mistake of buying 3-2 beer. Like they used to have this beer out here that didn't have the full percentage of alcohol in it. They call it 3-2 beer or whatever. So here I am with a 12 pack. I'm still alcoholic. I'm here with a 12 pack that basically amounts to 2 beers. And I'm like, dude, it sucks. You know what I mean? This is all the beer you have out here.
Yeah.
But Josh, he's like, no, you just can't buy the beer in the store. You have to go to the liquor stores. And I'm like, okay, I can't live here if this is all the beer you have. And after about 2 weeks, this guy walks into the house and he's like, who are you? And I'm like, who are you? And he's like, I'm so-and-so and I own this house. And I'm like, okay, I'm Josh's friend. I just moved here. And he goes, we don't need another roommate. And I'm like, Josh, you know what I mean? Yeah. Josh comes out and his eyes just got big. And I was like, oh, you son of a bitch. And come to find out this guy's kids had crawled up on the cabinet, gotten a hold of a THC chocolate bar or whatever. And he ended up spending time in jail for it. But now this guy's out of jail. He wants his house back. Yeah. I'm like, dude, he's like, listen, man, I appreciate your problem, but you can't stay here.
Yeah.
I just moved 1,480 miles away to be told that I can't live here. When my biggest fear at this time, you got to remember, the only way that I went to rehab was to avoid homelessness. Okay. Not because I wanted to quit drinking. So now I'm 1,480 miles away, getting ready to be homeless. I'm like, it just doesn't get any worse than this,
Yeah.
End up staying with the next door neighbor for a little bit, find out he's a meth head.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, dude, I would rather be with my backpack somewhere else, And so that's what I did, I started staying in parks, started walking around, just trying to do my thing. I ran into a guy on the train who had a chef coat on. And I was like, dude, so like, where you cooking, man? And like, I need a job. I'm going to work this out. I'm living in a park, but somehow I'm going to go work in a restaurant,
Right.
And he was like, dude, I can probably get you a job. I'm like, amazing. And he's like, where are you staying? And I was like, I'm staying in Bear Creek Trail Park right now. And he's like, well, we're actually looking for a roommate too. And I'm like, you've got to be shit. So I get a job and a roommate situation in one train ride. Like, this is amazing, So move in with these guys. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. The guy's got the living room set up as his bedroom. I'm sleeping on the couch in the living room. Then the other guy's got the bedroom, for what it's worth, like
Better
it was
than the
working.
park.
Yeah, it's better than the park, and I got a job. I went and it was Rock Bottom Brewery in Centennial. And the guy I met worked days. And then I worked nights. I was a lot more qualified. I was a little further along in the cooking experience than he was. But I worked nights and all that. And everything was just moving along. It was still dysfunctional as all get out, but I wasn't homeless.
Yeah.
And still had that hope of figuring things out. Things were going to be okay. And I remember I was leaving the pool one day, and there's these kids, these teenagers standing next to me, and I had some weed, and I was like, I gave them some, you know what I mean? I gave them some weed, you know what I mean? It was actually tangerine bubble hash. Put it in a little container, gave it to him, went on about my business. Well, this kid gets caught with that stuff. So I didn't know this, you know what I mean? Like, I figured I was being like, because I remember how hard it was to get weed back in the day when I was a kid, and I was like, man, I'm going to make it easy for this little dude. Here you go, man. And so I come to the pool the next day, and here comes Lakewood police pulling up. And they're like, how you doing, sir? And I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? I even let him in the pool, you know what I mean? All that. Walk back over to the spot, sit down, and they come and walk up next to me. And I'm like, hey, can I help you? And they're like, you fit the description of someone giving drugs to kids out here. And I was like, oh, no, man, you got the wrong person, man. You know what I mean? I don't give drugs to kids. You know what I mean? And they took my ID and all that stuff. And I'm slowly starting to find out that it's this kid I gave the marijuana to that told on me, and so I'm leaned up against the cop car and all that stuff. And he's like, this is a felony in the state of Colorado. And I'm like, and I almost threw up immediately. I was like, what? Like, dude, it was a tiny little bit of whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and he's like, yeah, it's a felony. So I ended up going to jail. They gave me a felony contributing to the delinquency of a minor charge. Job's gone, place is gone. I get out and I'm actually like living in a bush in the old apartment complex. And of course the drinking really takes off then. I go to the liquor store and get 14 mini bottles, throw them in my backpack, and I'm off, And that's just how it went for a little bit, man. I went to probation a little bit, and I ended up meeting this individual out here named Veronica. Started staying at her apartment for a while. And I stayed homeless, through all that, and not doing my probation or anything like that, and just really upset at the world, man. Upset at myself, feeling like I got a bum rap, and really just not genuinely grasping the severity of my situation.
Yeah.
Because I drank the severity away every morning. I numbed myself.
Yeah.
So finally I take off. I'm like, I got to get out of Colorado. After this probation. F whatever else is going on, somewhere else can't be any worse than here. So I might as well go back to where I know, people. So I went back to the Salvation Army rehab, in Charlotte and enrolled again. They let me in, just doing the program, started getting better again. I know how to do rehabs by this point, like I know, I know what the drill is, I'm starting to put size back on, and all that. And I get online and Sasha, my friend from school, Sasha, we used to go trick or treating. She used to be my middle school girlfriend. You might know Sasha Wiles. She's got fiery red hair.
Probably if I saw her, yeah.
Yeah, super smart chick. I see her online and I'm like, oh my goodness. I hadn't spoken to her in years. And I'm like, you look amazing. And she hit me back, hey, how you doing? So we start talking and everything. She's like, what are you doing there? And I'm like, well, I'm an alcoholic, and just trying to get my shit together, And she was like, I want to come visit you. And I'm like, I don't know how that's going to work, And she's like, something to the effect. She came and visited for the weekend, and I packed a bag. No. She eventually the conversation got around to, you don't need rehab, you need better people around you. I'm coming to get you. And I was like, perfect. You know what I mean? Like, an alcoholic loves it when people co-sign their bullshit. Like, right on. And so she comes and gets me, and I guess as a trial basis, we stayed the weekend in Charlotte and everything. And after a couple of days, she's like, "We're going back up to Virginia." And I'm like, "Okay." I was like, you're taking me out of rehab, right? Like, I'm not going to be sober. And she's like, "That's fine. We'll work on it. We'll get you where you need to be." I'm like, okay. So I get up to Virginia again, and I'm actually staying in her mom's house, her mom and her dad's house. The way the house was set up was, pretty separated, and I just stayed upstairs the whole time. They had no idea that I was living upstairs.
Oh, man.
And at first it was like, it was kind of adventuresome, I guess. You know what I mean? They loved me to death. You know what I mean? They did. But I would Like her son would run interference. She had a teenage son. He would run interference, and I'd get out of the house, and then they'd shut the front door. I'd wait a second, and then I'd turn around and knock on the door because I was supposed to be there for dinner, and her mom would answer, "Oh, hey, Cam," and I'd come in for dinner, and then at some point in time, rather than going out the front door, I would bust a left and just go upstairs, when it was time for me to leave. And I'm looking at Sasha like, this isn't going to work very long. You know what I mean? Like, first of all, I feel like a piece of shit, for deceiving your parents, and then I'm just like, I can't live like this. You know what I mean? You can't hide me. And, so it went on, and then she asked me to marry her one day. And I looked at her, and this girl is gorgeous. You know what I mean? Great family, good future ahead of her, great kid. And I looked at her, I was like, you're crazy, right? And she was like, no, I'm not. She was like, so we got engaged, Now, keep in mind, I'm still on the run from Colorado, probation, but here we are, we're engaged. Engaged to be married to a high school sweetheart, or actually a middle school sweetheart, and we were happy. Our situation was very, very dysfunctional. It wasn't normal by any means, but we loved each other, and, I was doing demolition, for a company in the DC Fairfax area and all that, still trying to work, still doing my thing. And then, but I was having these panic attacks, man, like severe panic attacks, a lot of anxiety. And I think, the alcohol really kicked it in, it does. And so, of course, I have one of these panic attacks. I get picked up by the police, the Loudoun County Police, and I get extradited away from Virginia back to Colorado.
Oh, wow.
For my probation charge. And I never saw Sasha again.
Oh, man.
I spoke to her on the phone a couple of times, like, and, I got out of jail and I called her and I was like, listen, she's like, don't come back here.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And I was like, all right, and, called some people that I knew again and just basically went back to couch surfing and homelessness. And that lasted for years, man.
Oof.
I couldn't pull it together. I couldn't stay sober. There was no way to get a job. There's no way to do anything else. I went to prison a couple times out here. They finally caught up with me for the probation and put me in a halfway house here in Colorado. And I was doing well. I got another job cooking for, Axios, which is a high-end Greek restaurant, making great money, working 70 hours a week, doing my thing. But then one day I went to the bus stop and instead of walking past that liquor store that I walk past every single day, I went in.
Yeah.
Got a bottle and started, and I went on the run from the halfway house. And that led to me going to Crowley Prison, which is one of the more violent prisons out here. I rolled up there and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to make it out of here. This is my first state prison, these are actual gang members. These are dangerous people, man. I just told myself, get big. What I mean? Don't be that guy in the room that looks like he's easy to get at,
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I went from 145 to 190 pounds within 10 months, stayed respectful, stayed in my lane.
Yeah.
Met a lot of people and I got out and, that led to parole and, of course, violated parole. I don't do well on probation or parole, you know what I mean? Having an alcohol addiction and all that. And then, so I ended up completing my, parole 4 Mile prison. And in 2019, I was released from there. It's just booze, man. Every time I got out, I went back and I grabbed a pack of cigarettes and I grabbed some more booze.
Yeah.
And it kept me where I was, and then one day, these are probably like the two things I really want to touch on. This is more current. One day I'm walking around out here and I'm homeless, and an alcoholic. I think I was about 135 pounds at this point, and I'm 5'10", that's pretty skinny.
Yeah.
I walked over to this guy named, this particular area over South Lowell and Quincy, and I'd been homeless over there. That was my friend Veronica's condo was over there. Like I figured I could probably get something to eat in this neighborhood, or bum some change or something like that. And so I go over to this pizza place, named Mike's Famous Pizza. And I walk in, there's a guy behind the counter and, hey, listen, do you guys have any kind of mess ups or, anything that somebody didn't pick up that you can give away, And the dude's like, yeah, hang on a second. I think we got something right here. Well, immediately this other guy named Gary steps up and he's like, "No, man, we don't have anything, and you need to get the fuck out of my restaurant."
Mm-hmm.
And I just looked at him. I'm like, "Dude, you can't talk to me like that, man." You know what I mean? Like he knew of me, who I was. He knew I was Veronica's friend. You know, he knows her. And so we had an argument, back and forth, basically just calling each other names. And he starts coming around the corner. This guy's like over 200 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
And so I start scurrying out of the restaurant as quickly as possible. And I get out, drop my bag, and I turn around and square up thinking he's going to, do something. And he doesn't come out. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And there's a dispensary next door, and then there's a liquor store. And so naturally, if I can't get any food, I'm going to the liquor store. I walked in and these people know me in there, but they do not put up with panhandling or asking for any change or money on that particular sidewalk. They just don't. I've been out there before for like 5 minutes and they're like, "No, man, no. If you got come in, but no, you're not going to do that out here." But, so I walked in and I was like, "Listen, I'm going to be out front for just like 10 minutes. Okay." And she's like, "All right, just hurry up." And I'm like, all right, cool. So, within said, I'm out there, I do this thing where I juggle a baseball. It's almost on. Do you know what Fushima ball is?
Yeah, I've seen it.
You roll the ball along your arms and stuff like that. I do something similar with a baseball. So I'm out front doing that. And, I come up with enough money to get me a little half pint of whiskey. I think it was a pint of whiskey. And, I'm drinking this. And this is about 45 minutes later. And I think I go to put my bottle in my bag. I'm still in front of the liquor store. And I hear, hang on a second. I got to talk to this dude for a minute. And I look up and this guy is backing out of the way. And on the other side of him is the guy that I got into an argument with at the pizza place. And he just unloads on me with bear mace.
Holy shit. I didn't see that coming.
Destroys me, man.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm reaching in the bag and I just look up like this and just get destroyed. And like I tried to break left and everything, and I stop and I'm at the back of the parking lot and I had a wife beater on, the tank top. And I just looked at myself and I knew I was in trouble, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I knew I was in big time trouble. And I looked up and I was like, "Oh, you motherfucker." And I started walking towards his store. He had run inside of his store and locked the door. And I stood there banging on the window, calling him a bunch of names and stuff. And I turned around to walk away. And I remember seeing a dog in the back. And dude, I'm not so sure it wasn't OC either because it fogged. Like that stuff was still hanging in the air. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was a dog in the back seat, and that pissed me off. You know what I mean? This dog's got the windows down too, and this motherfucker. And I turned around and I went back to the window and banged on it a couple more times. The whole front plate glass window of his restaurant breaks.
Oh man,
it shatters. And so at this point, I look at my hand. I got a tiny little cut, and I'm starting to get hot. You know what I mean? Like really hot. And I don't remember if I grabbed my bag or not, but my friend, Veronica, it was staying about a mile away. If I can get to her house, I can get a shower. This motherfucker, I can't believe this. And by this time, it's kicking into my face. You know what I mean?
That shit hurts. It sucks, man. I've been there.
Yeah. Like you said the other day, like hot glass in your eyes.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
So I make it over to V's house, and V's drunk. She was my drinking buddy, and she's drunk. She's obnoxious, and she's not letting me get a shower. And I'm like, I have to get a shower. The neighbors call the cops. Well, the cops show up, and Arapahoe County cop shows up and I can't remember if I had like a failure to appear or
some kind of warrant.
or what I had going on, but he ends up taking me to jail. So I get to jail. This cop has got my hands up behind my head like this. Okay. Going in, and we're jaw jacking each other back and forth and all that. He gets me, and by the time all the cops had run out, I've been arrested a few times. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, but I've been arrested a few times. And the Arapahoe County cops know me. They know I'm not a problem. I got a big mouth, but I calm down, And so I get in there, and all these cops come out. And they're like, "Whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing?" I'm like, "Look what he's doing to me." You know what I mean? And so they take me from him. Like we got him. What's going on, Watson? And I'm like, "Man, this dude, blah, 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 blah." I was like, I got sprayed with something. I don't know what it is, but I'm on fire, So I'm in the reception area and this cop's walking back and forth, talking the shit about charging me with assault and all this. I'm like, assault? I was laughing, what you just did to me? And I stood up, and by the time the cops grabbed me, and they started moving me over to a different holding area away from this guy. And I made some comment to him, like, they were like, you're going to get charged with assault. I was like, you might as well, because I'm probably just going to kill myself when I get back out to the streets anyways. Well, as soon as I said that, and right after you mentioned anything, you're going butt naked and you're going to the cell. So they took me over to the cell that is a dry cell. There's no bed, no sink, no toilet, no water, nothing, just a hole in the floor and a camera in the corner. And they're like, take off your clothes. And I'm like, come on, guys. Like, I'm okay. Like, I'm not going to do anything crazy, And I took off my shirt, gave it to them. And they're like, no, come on, give us the rest of the clothes. And I'm like, come on, guys, I'm okay. Dude, they grabbed me and held me in the air horizontal and yanked my pants and my underwear off of me. And then left me on the floor and forgot about me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Covered in bear mace, and they left me in there with a turtle suit on the supposed mental health hold, on camera. And I just roasted in bear mace for, I don't know, the next, 6-8 hours. And then finally, like, I banged on the door and I got somebody from the next shift to come in. And, this guy was a little bit more receptive of my situation. And I was like, dude, I need water. You know what I mean? Like, I need water bad. And he was like, all right, hang on. And he came back and he took me over to one of these dress out showers. Oh, the showers in Arapahoe are like super hot. Like, they're the kind you dip under, you dip out. You can't stand underneath, So I'm in there washing.
Complimented the bear mace nicely.
Oh, dude, it was so horrible, man. Like, I jumped in underneath that thing, and the cop was standing there with me, started choking off the vapors that were coming off of me. He ran out, and I lasted about a minute and a half in that hot water in the bear mace. It reactivates everything,
Gets back in your eyes.
Yeah, and at this point I'm closed, and I'm like, well, at least thanks for the clothes, man. As he's walking me back to the cell, and I get to the cell, he's like, all right, I'll give you your clothes, and I'm like, God, what? Come on, man. He's like, I got it. It's nothing I can do. And I'm like, all right. So they left me in there, man, covered in bear mace. And I get out the next day. It took me a day or two to find a shower, and finally get all this shit off of me. At this point, I'm homeless. I got bear mace, and I got this stuff off of me. And I'm walking around the neighborhood. It's like 4 days later. And I turn a corner in the same neighborhood. And then I see some Denver cops like down the way, and I'm like, because nobody had said anything about this broken window yet. And I'm like, I'm just gonna scoot past these guys real quick. You know what I mean? And I get tackled in the street like immediately. And I remember telling him, dude, just don't mace me. Just don't mace me. You know what I mean?
Don't tase me.
It was such a weak, half-hearted attempt to run. Like, even me and the cop, as we're rolling on the ground, are laughing at each other. You know what I mean? And we pop up, and I'm like, dude, I'm good. He's like, man, why'd you try to run? I was like, man, I had to try. You know what I mean? And so we get over. Well, they take me to jail. This guy, they charged me with felony criminal mischief for breaking the window, okay, and take me to jail. Nobody ever said anything about me getting assaulted by this man.
Yeah.
I'd also been diagnosed with PTSD by this time, actually a few months prior to that, and was still trying to come to terms with that. It made a lot of sense, though, why I was always shaky and why I would have these panic attacks, like back up in Virginia. It explained a lot of my past,
Yeah.
And, so I do the Denver jail thing and all that. Well, I get out, and one night I'm laying on a sidewalk. I'm just laying there, like I'm hurt. Let me start over. I'm trying to put these thoughts together. So I've been bear maced. I've been arrested for it. Been charged. I think like a week later, I got beat up in a park, and I don't remember anything. You know what I mean? I wake up in the hospital, and like I remember walking away from my friend, and then I woke up in the hospital, and it's complete, like almost like a surgery blackout. You know what I mean? Like, or you absolutely don't remember anything. And so, I get out here, I'm like, what happened? And she gives me this long list, handwritten. The top says concussion, and I could tell because like I've got these lumps all over my head, and like I still don't know what happened. And I go to I get out of the hospital, and I'm back on the streets, man. That was one thing too. Like all these injuries that I've had, like I always ended up back on the streets. There was no going to somebody's house, and healing up. There was no laying on a couch. There was none of that shit. You know, I had a broken clavicle. It's carrying my backpack and walking my bike. You know, it was just par for the course, man. You know, I'd spent 10 years doing this shit, and now here I am again, you know, and everything's just getting worse, man. And one particular night, you know, after I'd left the hospital and gotten cleaned up a little bit, I had a panic attack, and I went to the Highlands Ranch Hospital. Like, listen, I just got beat up recently. I got a concussion, you know, I'm freaking out, you know, and they let me stay and calm down for about 6 or 7 hours. Well, I get out and I'm back in the neighborhood. I'm laying down on the sidewalk in front of the 7-Eleven because I fractured my collarbone, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months prior to that. And my whole chest hurts. I just got beat up too, you know, and I'm just laying there and this cop pulls up. And he's like, Watson, come on, I got a warrant for you. And I'm like, dude, what do you mean? Like, dude, I am sorry. And I stepped towards him like, dude, I am so tired of you guys arresting me. You know, like, it seems like every 2 weeks you guys are arresting me for something, you know, like a failure to appear or whatever it is, you know. And we had words and stuff, and he ended up calling an ambulance for me because I was in bad shape, you know. And I'm laying on this ambulance bed at the back of the ambulance, and I'm talking cash shit to these ambulance people, and they're talking trash back to me and all that. And shut the fuck up, Watson. You know, and I went to lean up. I was like, what the fuck you say to me, man? And as soon as I leaned up, this cop snatches me off of the bed and slams me face first on the ground, like fucking my forehead up, messing my cheek up and all that stuff, picks me up, throws me into his car, and hauls my ass off to jail. You know, I wake up in jail and I have a 2nd-degree assault with a dangerous weapon charge. And I'm like, what is this? Like, assault? You know what I mean? Like, you pancake me on the pavement, man. You know what I mean? Like where's this coming from? And so after a couple of weeks in jail, you know, my lawyer, I look at her and I'm like, listen, like, I didn't do this. You know what I mean? And she goes, well, you know, I read the transcript and it sounds like you. And, you know, and I'm like, sounds like me. And I was like, well, what do I need to do? You know what I mean? And she's like, well, if you don't take the plea agreement, they're going to aggravate it and they're going to send you to prison. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, what's the plea agreement? They're like, probation. I'm like, probation? I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll take probation. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking about an aggravated 2nd-degree assault with a dangerous weapon charge and you're going to give me probation? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll take probation, you know? So they let me out, you know, and of course I don't do the probation, you know, I'm homeless. And it ends up turning into, let's see what, yeah. So between that and then the Denver charge for breaking the window, can't do either one of those probations, you know, and they convert, I get a halfway house sentence. They convert one probation for Arapahoe County to a halfway house. And Denver gives me a year in Denver jail for breaking that window, ran concurrent with the other one, with the halfway house sentence. You know, so now I'm at the halfway house and I'm getting sober again, you know, and I'm pissed. You know what I mean? I got like, that guy should have caught assault charges. You know, I accidentally broke the window. Now I'm paying for this window. I got a year in jail hanging over my head. I didn't assault anybody. They said in the paperwork that I punched the EMT in the face so hard that her teeth were loose the next day. Okay. And then I had assaulted 2 other people earlier that night. I've got hospital records that say that basically I'm incapable of assaulting anybody, you know, let alone Devin. I don't do that stuff. I didn't grow up beating up people and being crazy. and I'm miserable. You know, I don't know what to do. You know, I'm in this halfway house. I'm waking up, having panic attacks, getting sober. And I'm like, dude, I have to stand up for myself somehow. Like, I don't know what to do. You know, so I started getting in touch with, they tried to get in touch with the Coonses. They were, their dad was a baseball coach and an FBI agent of mine. I'm trying to address being left in a bear mace cell, you know, and then subsequently being slammed on my face by a cop and then charged with an assault that I didn't do and a weapon I never had, you know, but nobody's helping me, man. So I started filing attorney general complaints. I contacted the governor and then the police harassment started. You know, all that little gang stalky shit that they do. And it's, I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, every day I woke up in that halfway house, man, knowing I'm not supposed to be there. I didn't do anything. You know what I mean? I did not do this, but I have to get my shit together. Yeah. Somehow I have to go through this and I have to get my shit together. Yeah. You know, I got a great job working at Boyd Sign Systems doing their screen printing. It turns out that I'm a hell of a screen printer. You know, I can screen tip, I can screen print. I'm in the sign business now, you know. Currently, you know, that's what I do. I'm the painter for Life to Design at John Curtis Design. You know, I you know, sit there like I got to stand up to these people. You know, these are things that have been bothering me my entire life. Well, one was Loudoun County, pulling that shit on us as kids. I filed with the ACLU, and then I filed with the Attorney General's office on the bear mace and all this. And part of me's thinking I'm going to file these complaints and someone's going to come to my rescue.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? No, nobody came to my rescue. Nobody said anything. And I started getting harassed by the cops. You know what I mean? I was standing at a bus stop and cops are spotlighting me with their lights.
Yeah.
But I had to deal with it. I had to somehow pull it together, and I stayed sober and I finished that sentence. I did a year there and I finished it. And I remember 6 weeks before my sentence was up, my case manager was like, "Oh yeah, I did your time and you've got 6 weeks left." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Dude, so I just did a year here and I'm getting ready to go homeless." Oh my God, and somehow I pulled it together on Craigslist with a gentleman to rent a room in his 2-bedroom apartment complex. And, a total stranger, but nice enough guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finished my sentence and I moved out, and this whole time there's a lot of weird shit going on with my cell phone. I constantly feel like I'm being followed, and so compound all of that. In 2021, I was diagnosed with schizoaffective depressive type.
Mm-hmm.
And PTSD. So now these people are trying to tell me that I'm schizophrenic, David. Like, dude, I'm not schizophrenic. Like the PTSD I can absolutely see, but the schizo thing, absolutely not. First of all, when they diagnosed me with the schizo stuff, they never did any blood tests. I was in a Motel 6, where there's all kinds of weird shit going on, and I failed a drug test for meth like a month and a half later. You know what I mean? Like, so I was obviously back on drugs. I'm not schizophrenic. I said all that to say, the next part, man, like the current situation, I'm out for 4 months. I'm finally out of the system. The living situation is not working all that well, but we're getting along, we decided it was time for me to move out. I still had my job. I didn't feel comfortable there anyways, so I got in touch with a guy by the name of Dan Fluke. It's one of my other friends' acquaintance.
Mm-hmm.
And he lets me know that there's a gentleman named John Clark that'll rent an apartment suite. He'll work with my credit history. By this time I'd established like some good credit. Like I bought a whole bunch of stuff and was paying it off, and almost had a 700 credit score.
Okay.
And I'm doing okay. And John's going to work with me on my felony stuff. I'm going to be in the same neighborhood. That's my job. I can walk to work. RTD was a big thing for me at that point in time, caused a lot of panic attacks and stuff. Like, and the only way I was relieving any of that was more booze, so that was already starting up again. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, what am I going to do? I've got this apartment that I'm going to move into. John's going to do it. I got my job. I'm like, we're just going to have to make this happen. And it's Labor Day weekend, 2023. It was a Thursday before that weekend. I went over to Dan's house after work and his apartment. And I'm like, listen, would it be okay if I paid you a little bit of money for me to stay here for like 4 days or so? I'm going to be signing a lease, with John. I'm not sure where the apartment is yet. It's going to be in the neighborhood. And he's like, yeah, it's fine. He's like, you don't even have to pay me. And I was like, well, I'd rather pay you. You're saving me money from spending, $300-400 on a crappy motel room,
Mm-hmm.
So I threw him $80 and my other friend Kim was there. This is the situation that I'm in now.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there for, I guess, 3 days and I don't really like this place. I figured, just stay here for 4 days. You'll be out, you have your own place. Dude, they smoke cigarettes inside. It's just kind of grimy. I don't really like the way he treats Kim, and I'm like, I just stay out of the apartment as much as possible, go there to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been good. So I'm waking up, I'm buying their booze, I'm buying the weed, I gave him the money, I'm bringing food in, just trying to be like cordial, making it work. I only got to be here for a few days. But on the 4th day, Labor Day weekend, on a Monday, Kim's sitting on the couch and Kim is disabled. She's waiting on a hip replacement. And I've known Kim for a number of years. We've been homeless together, not together, but, in the same locations. Yeah. And this
just
dude,
so you know, Kim, we're going to probably run out of juice here in a few minutes.
Yeah. Well,
Just so I don't want us to get cut off.
Yeah. No, it's cool, man. I kind of went long-winded on it. This dude hits me in the face, man. He gets in an argument with Kim, and I stopped the argument. I stopped it. It was a domestic. I stopped it. He turns around and hits me in the face with a fucking cane. Okay. Splits my face wide open. I slapped him twice. I punched him twice. Went to the liquor store, got a shot of liquor, walked back over, waited on the cops. By the time I get to the jail, they charged me with first-degree attempted murder with a weapon. And my lawyer did not work for me at all, man. She presents me with this photograph. I went to the hospital, got stitched and everything, but presents me with a photograph of me on the scene that doesn't show a gash in my face. Nothing at all. It shows a scar. She goes, Cameron, there's not a cut on your face. And I was like, lady, I went to the hospital and got stitched. There better be a cut on my face, you know? And at that point, I knew the cops were trying to screw me. So now I've got 18 Attorney General complaints, 4 United States Department of Justice civil rights complaints. There's people watching me right now. I guarantee it. You know what I mean? And I'm back in the halfway house. Even the judge wasn't buying that shit. He sentenced me to no restitution, no medical bills on this individual. That guy and all of his friends stole my identity, stole all my property. They've been trying to get payday loans and credit cards and all this shit. And that's where I am now, man. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I wish I would have gotten into more of that with you, but you know, that's what, like, all that stuff that's on my Facebook is my current situation. You know, and it's got to stop, man. I've been charged 3 times with, you know, crimes that I didn't commit. You know, I've been railroaded through the court system with plea agreements. This last time I took the plea agreement because I knew when I saw that photograph that somebody was trying to screw me. You know, and I was facing 16 to 48 years in prison after just getting my life back, man. You know, so, you know, I've got a great job again and in the halfway house, you know, but yeah, that whole story's on my Facebook, you know. I don't know if I feel like I just kind of like, you know, you're right. It does go quick.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, when you're talking about number one, dude, it goes by. I know we've done this before.
Yeah.
And like,
you know,
it goes by quick. Then your current situation, I figure there's got to be something at the hospital, maybe a record or something, but.
I do. I have the medical records of state assault by other bodily force. When I got out to the halfway house, I got a hold of my eyewitness. Nobody ever spoke to my eyewitness. Nobody ever looked at my medical records. Nobody ever looked at the video. There's audio available of the altercation. Nobody looked at any of that. And they put me back in the halfway house, man. Yeah. And part of me is convinced it's because of the Bear Mace situation and the assault by that cop. You know, I don't know. I know that Denver and the city of Inglewood are in federal court right now for civil rights violations.
Oh, right.
Yeah, there's a lady out here. Yeah, there's a lady by the name of Reagan Benson who's on YouTube who's been all over these cops out here. Like, they're dirty, man. They do some dirty shit. And it just falls right in line with what's going on in my situation. You know, I don't have anybody to help me yet.
Yeah.
You know, it's especially.
Yeah, I would say in your current situation, I mean, you've got a story put together, you know, plus we can edit things, you know, not take anything out or anything, but just edit it.
No, you can say, I mean, you do whatever you want with this, man. It's cool.
Yeah, as long as, you know, and then once you get your current story out there, you know, that can help, and then get it to the right person or some, you know, exposure. Yeah.
Right.
But
I mean, and the only thing I do, I mean, the only thing I really have, man, is my social media. You know, my parents back me 100%. You know, my stepdad thinks that what's going on out here is bullshit. Yeah. You know, and he doesn't co-sign any of my stuff. You know, he doesn't. You know, so he's looked into this. You know, my job's been very supportive. These guys are awesome here. Yeah. You know, I've been kicking ass here, doing my thing. I'm 22 months sober, you know, which works for me. You know, I'll probably go back and smoke my weed whenever I get out, but I got another 3 years of this halfway house.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to quit fighting, man. You know, I've got to, you know, I've got those complaints with the Attorney General. I got the complaints with the Justice Department, the ACLU. I've contacted the FBI, Department of Homeland Security got involved with my identity theft.
Yeah.
You know, these individuals assaulted me, stole all my property, and then gave statements to the police. You know, on the situation.
That's crazy.
You know, and nobody looked at the eyewitness, the audio, video, or the medical records. I mean, assault by other bodily force is a pretty good indication of self-defense.
Yeah.
You know, and it's frustrating, man. You know, it really is. But I keep my shit together for the most part. Lifting and eating and working is all I do.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, when you see me on Facebook,
yeah,
you know
that'll
what I mean?
keep you centered.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not even court ordered to therapy, but I put myself back in therapy, you know, like,
yeah, there you go.
I do that, you know, once every 2 weeks, and he thinks I'm doing great, you know, with everything, you know, the way the situation is.
It seemed like it to me, you know, what I'm talking about. You're not all over the place.
No, you know,
you're
it's
a regular
it's-
guy, man.
Yeah. I don't know if like any of this like it was worth it. You know what I mean? Like for you guys.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you're living it, right? But that's a hell of a
Yeah.
story, you know.
Yeah.
And
I mean, even I don't even care. Like honestly, like I don't even care if this gets posted or nothing, man. Like or anything. Like just the fact that I've been able to sit here and tell somebody who actually knows me,
yeah,
you know, like, tell the story, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
and get it out. You know, I've posted all this information on my Facebook. The one thing that these people don't have is any credible evidence. You know,
Right,
once I
yeah.
get in front of some credible investigators or somebody that is able to actually do something about my situation, I think my situation will improve dramatically.
yeah,
You know?
I think so. And I mean, of course, we're gonna post it under Jarblehead and see where that goes.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people see that.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because then we do have an FBI guy, retired FBI guy coming on, but he was a whole nother section. He did like child abuse, abduction, trafficking,
Right.
things like that. He worked that
Yeah.
shit once we get it done. It takes a little
Yeah.
while, but I'll tell you when it goes up.
You know, the one thing that really struck me was how easy it was for me to pull together everything I needed. You know, I signed a 5-month plea agreement and it took me a matter of weeks to pull enough together to not even be charged, you know? So hey, I don't understand what the problem was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, since then, my defense attorney's been fired. You know, she no longer works for the public defender's office. She either got fired or she left. I'm not sure what the whole story is on that.
Yeah.
I know she's a liar. She lied to me several times, you know, and it's just, you know, I don't know what to do about this any more than just, I filed all the paperwork, man.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all I can do. I could get a pro bono attorney,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, it's almost like I don't even have time to do that, man.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know
Like,
exactly what you mean.
Keeping my shit together and working and doing everything I'm supposed to. I've completed the halfway house program, you know, and I'm eligible to move out,
Yeah.
but I don't have any credit anymore, and I don't have a rental history. So
That's going to be a pain in the ass, man. I would say this, you know what, in closing, it seems like you're doing all the right things now and just stay healthy, man.
Yeah.
And you know, I'll do what I can, which isn't much, but exposure, I think, helps a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I
go
know
from there.
I talked a lot about the beginning, the Washington Post stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those people definitely need to be held accountable for what they did. You don't do that to kids, man.
Yeah.
You know,
the whole
there's
thing
other
was
ways to
weird.
handle that.
Yeah, I was
But it
gone
was-
already, I think. And plus, I mean, I was looking at going in the military, which I didn't go until 97, but
Yeah.
I was out working and stuff by 95, you know,
Yeah.
construction, shit like that.
And
With Dana Browning.
but anybody that sees it, it's all on my Facebook.
Yeah,
I don't post anything unless I can prove it.
Right,
You know,
right.
that's one thing. Lying in this situation would not be beneficial to me in the least.
Yeah, no, just discredit yourself, then everything goes down the toilet.
We can link your Facebook.
Maybe we can link your
want that?
Facebook to it.
Would that you be okay with that if we linked your Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I've got, you know, and I can't let that. Also, can't let this take away me either. So I've got a 1-1 what a booty post or page. Also 1-1's what a booty.
Yeah.
And, you know, because it's an amazing part of the female anatomy anyways, but also booty meaning like a pirate's chest, you
Yeah, I
know,
know what
treasures,
you
you
mean.
know,
I got
things
you.
that I value, you know, so that's where I get a lot of my art stuff off.
Okay.
There's humorous stuff, you know, and of course there's any pictures that is there, you know, but you know, my other page, my Stephen Karen Watson page has been solely devoted to fixing, you know, this current situation,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, we'll link it and go from there, and we'll stay in touch with you too. I think a storm's rolling
Yeah.
in. You're starting to break up.
Yeah. It's probably my dad leaving a message. He called.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You know,
Well, we do
you
have
know,
big storms. I was wondering why. I didn't think that would interfere, but it could, I guess.
yeah. But yeah, I'll keep it together. And you know, it's great being back in touch. You know, with you and Brian. It's awesome to meet you. I'm sure we'll talk again too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
You know, and yeah, just you know, it's an obvious situation that I believe has obvious answers. You know,
Yeah.
and we'll just see what happens, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We'll see what
Absolutely.
happens, and I appreciate you taking the time, dude, and stay healthy. Best of luck. And
Yeah.
but I mean, in the meantime, we'll be going back and forth, man.
Yeah, as soon as we have the clip scheduled, we'll let you know when it pops up on our YouTube. We're collecting
Yeah,
a whole
yeah.
bunch. We're trying to collect like 30, 40. And then you
Yeah.
release them daily. It's the best thing for the algorithm to kick us off. And so
Correct.
for something what we did here, podcast, usually we're heckling and jeckling. So I think
Yeah.
as we build a good following, the more like guest appearance type stuff, I want to put more at the end where more eyes are going to catch it, you know, to
Right.
assist the motivation. So it could be 60 days potentially from now when you get scheduled.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Just whatever you guys got to do, man.
Yeah.
You know, and anything happens out here, you know, with this situation, I'll absolutely,
Yeah, just let me know.
you know, stay be in touch with it and stuff. And I'm on Facebook daily
Yeah.
with it. If you're not aggravating to these people, they will not pay
Oh, they'll
attention to
just
you.
go
So
away for them.
some of my videos are highly aggravating, you know what I mean? But I got to be careful because there is that fine line, you know what I mean?
You don't want to go too far. Well,
Yeah.
look, man,
You know,
we're running out, but it's been great talking to you, catching up with you. You look good. Take care of yourself. I think that's like the main thing. Everything else falls into place, you know.
it will.
So-
It will. And I'll
But
keep
it's
it
good
up,
to
man.
see you, brother.
And I'll stay in touch.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, definitely.
Thanks,
Good to
guys.
see you, man.
All right, dude. Have a good one.
God.